everybody, welcome to Nostalgia Goggles, and more importantly, welcome back to Final Fantasy VII month. I'm Chris, also known as Retro Gaming Nerd, and today we're talking about an interesting one. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, every game on this list is an interesting game, but we're going to be talking about a prequel, Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. Well, we're talking about this one, but it started out here. Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core is interesting because it is a prequel to Final Fantasy VII, and not only a prequel, but about a character that, realistically, I feel like a lot of people could have missed. Not like Vincent or Yuffie kind of missed, but like their importance you wouldn't 100% see as important, I feel. You could totally just think that he saved Cloud and that's about it. So it's interesting to kind of make a game about this character. I know that that's kind of bold for me to say, but that's what was my thought process when it first came out. So let's see if this one is more than just saving Cloud. So let's talk about the story of Crisis Core. Crisis Core is a prequel to Final Fantasy VII, which makes it kind of interesting because it follows the character Zack and his struggles of being a soldier. The story of Crisis Core mainly revolves around a soldier named Genesis and him defecting with your mentor, Angeal. This is important because it kind of talks about the struggles that it takes for somebody to betray and kind of talks about the struggles of working for Shinra, especially since Zack wants to be a hero. Really, this game's whole thing is following your dreams and also, really, that's it. It's actually really just following your dreams and, I guess, having honor about it and finding your way. Kind of following the whole tradition of Final Fantasy VII in general of, identity and, all that other stuff. I mean, one of the other things that does definitely happen in this game is that you get to see characters before they start up. Like, for instance, Yuffie is in the game and so is Aerith. And you kind of get to understand the relationship of Zack, but at the end of the day, yeah, it's just a prequel. And I absolutely love this game when it comes down to the story. It does a really good job. It does have some issues, but I'll get into that in the good and the bad. But I absolutely love this game, but then again, there's a bias here because I love Zack, but this game kind of makes me love Zack. All in all, I think the story works out very well. But none of this matters if the gameplay isn't good. So with that being said, let's talk about the gameplay. So the gameplay of Final Fantasy Crisis Core is interesting because it is an action RPG. It's a lot more grounded than Kingdom Hearts and even Final Fantasy XVI, but it's pretty close to Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is probably why the remake is the way it is. It's not one-to-one, mind you, because with this game you only have about one button that you're able to press for attack, and how you're able to use materia or magic is by pressing the R button. And once you press the R button, you can press the symbol buttons. I don't know how to I don't know what to call them, but you press the symbol buttons and whatever materia you have on those buttons you're able to use. It makes the gameplay flow very well, and I actually like this a lot. It reminds me of having the quick menu in Kingdom Hearts and how much I enjoy that. Another thing that also is in this game is you have the slot machine system. I know it has a name, but I just can't think of it right now, and that works at random. Now, you kind of can tell which characters you're going to get more of by which mission you're on or where you are in the story, but outside of that, it's pretty random. There probably is a way to check it out, but I don't exactly know. Going back to materia, which is something I want to go to, you are actually able to fuse materia to make more powerful materia in this game, so that's cool as well. And another thing about this game that's very important is there's a story to it, but the one thing that's super important is missions. That's the way that you level up in this game. I mean, you can go through the game regularly, but missions are a great way to level up and get items, which is great. Too bad it is tedious. I feel like that's kind of the biggest problem with this game, is that the missions are kind of tedious due to the fact that the game is the same thing constantly. You run here, you attack this, you move on. That's pretty much the whole game. I think it's fun, I think it's great, but it does kind of get boring after a certain point, and it's something that most of my gameplay footage is. So I can't say that I 100% love the whole mission system or how tedious it is. I wish you could do more, or I wish missions were more in depth than run here, kill this, but that's how it works. Outside that, the game runs very well, and I think that the gameplay is very nice, especially since there are mini games within this too, but they're a lot more restricted, and they're a lot more story-based Like, the missions are, like, for instance, there's a stealth mission in the game. There's a quick time event where you cut missiles, and there's also a sniping minigame. They focus more on the story than Final Fantasy VII proper, and they're also kind of skippable. Like, unlike Final Fantasy VII where you have to do them, this one you could just shrug your shoulders and move on. That's pretty much the gameplay. With that being said, Crisis Core is a interesting one to talk about due to the fact that I'm not talking about the PSP game exclusively, even though there's not much of a difference between the PlayStation and the PS4/5 version. I think the presentation's pretty good. I think when it comes down to cutscenes, it's amazing, it's awesome, I love them. Well, when they're pre-rendered. Sometimes the in-game cutscenes are a little awkward, but I do like them, they're fun. The voice acting is something that a lot of people talk about, but it's something that I don't 100% notice. That also might just be because I didn't play Crisis Core originally on the PlayStation Portable. Like, I didn't start there, right? Like, I played it and then I didn't really focus on it, so I can't sit here and talk about it. I do like the new voice acting. I do like the way Zack presents himself. It does feel a little different, but I don't think it's the biggest change in the world. Another thing I want to talk about with this game is this one's one of those weird ones where the soundtrack of it is odd, right? It sounds a lot like Final Fantasy 15 kind of country sounding, westernish kind of, I don't know how to put it, but you'll hear it in the episode. It's odd for me. It's odd, but it sounds kind of homey, and I think that that's kind of the thing that this game is trying to go for. But it's also kind of weird that it's so prevalent throughout this game, right? And I gotta say that the music itself is also hit or miss altogether, you know? I guess that's what I'm really trying to say, is come around and say that this music is kind of hit or miss. When it's great, it's great. When it's not, it's okay, you know? And last but not least, I want to talk about, well, pretty much everybody else. Zack has an interesting connection with everybody, and it is shown through emails and also just the lottery cutscenes. You get to see him hanging out with more people and kind of the impact that they put on him. And that's something that this game really focuses on, is the impact that these people give, either positive or negative, such as positive. Angeal is a really big influence, and you can see that through the past cutscenes and even just how he talks about him. On the other hand, there is a negative impact, which is Genesis, which Genesis also impacts me negatively, but I'll probably talk more about that in the good or the bad. All in all, this game is really about more of like the interpersonal relationships with Zack, and I absolutely love that. It's nice to see him, you know, existing, I guess. It's nice to see him in general, and I think that all in all, this game presents it very well, or at least presents him very well. With that being said, none of this matters if you can't get your hands on the game, so let's move on to accessibility. So Final Fantasy Crisis Core came out on two kind of consoles. I'm kind of generalizing this one, so when I say two consoles, I mean two generations. One of them is for the PlayStation Portable, which will set you back about 26 to 50 bucks. That's about where it'll set you back. Now, during my research, I learned something new. I did not know that there is a very specific PlayStation Portable console for this. This is the only time I'm going to talk about this, because I feel like this one kind of makes me laugh, because this console is more prevalent than in my research than the actual game. This will set you back about $200 or a best offer. I think that's hilarious. I did not know that there was a Crisis Core PlayStation Portable. I should have figured there'd be one, but that's cool that that's there and that's an option to play the game on. I don't know. If you really like Crisis Core and you're collecting these kind of things, that's some cool information, but not necessary. And last but not least, there's Final Fantasy Reunion, which is a remake, which is kind of the one we're talking about today. That one will set you back about modern game prices, so take that as you will. I think, if I'm going to be honest with you, as much as I love the PlayStation Portable, I think if you have the chance, just play the modern version of the game. So with that being said, let's move on to the goods and the bads. The takeaway that I can bring to Final Fantasy Crisis Core is that its story is the best part of it. The gameplay is okay, but if you're coming to Crisis Core, you're coming for the story, and maybe not even the story, you're coming for Zack, because he's the best thing about this game. He is the best character, probably because he's the main character, but what really makes this game is his interactions and his journey, and I love it. Now, the reason why I say this is because Zack is a perfect catalyst to have all these characters revolve around, to see their interactions. To see the interaction with him and Sephiroth is very interesting. Him and his new mentor, Angeal in Genesis, mainly Angeal, and also to see his interaction with Aerith. It's cool to have this character that's so important to the Final Fantasy lore actually be important. Originally in Final Fantasy, you could totally miss Zack's existence. Like, Aerith definitely talks about him, but you can miss how important he is. Like, I guess you can't, but you know what I mean. I feel like you can live your whole life without knowing who this character is, and this game kind of tells you, no, you can't. I love Zack a lot. I feel like this is a super biased take because I love him a lot. But to be fair here, the reason why I love him a lot is because this game did such a great job at presenting this character. All in all, the best thing about this game is the story and the character. Now, yeah, the story itself can get a little messy, but I guess we'll talk about that in the beds, huh? I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off. I don't like Genesis. I don't think Genesis is a bad character. Actually, his whole motivation is great, but God, man, him and Loveless just... if you don't know what I'm talking about, that means that you haven't played the game, and that's perfectly fine. But he has this character trait, which... The best way to describe him is he is like if you gave ultimate power to a theater kid, right? Because he is constantly spouting off this play slash book slash whatever constantly. And the thing that's annoying about it isn't even that Genesis is spouting it off. The thing that makes this the most annoying is that there is no Genesis in real life, right? No, there is no Loveless in real life. So I have no clue what he's talking about. He just, it's like literally, I feel like the best way to describe his character is like him quoting a movie constantly, and you haven't seen the movie, and you won't see the movie. And I don't know why that bothers me. This is a very personal thing, but it bothers me, and it makes it kind of hard to relate to him or like him, since his reasoning for being a villain is very, very understandable. Outside of the personal bads in this game, I think one of the biggest missed opportunities is the gameplay. It's not bad. I like it, but it definitely is repetitive. I can see where that would be a turnoff, you know, because you miss out on a lot on the missions, but also you're not missing out because they're the same crap. I think the missions are definitely they get stale. You don't have to do them, but it's kind of recommended, and also, I mean, they kind of are necessary to a degree too, because that's the best way to level up. I don't know, you can, white knuckle the game and probably push through with minimal leveling up, but I feel like it's hard for me to say that you don't need it, because I needed it. With all that being said, I feel like the bads in this game, outside of the Genesis rant itself, are minor. I don't think that they ruin the game. I just think they're kind of nitpicky. And even to be honest with you, some of the shortcomings definitely make sense because it's a PlayStation portable game, right? Like, I feel like the leveling up was to make it a longer experience. I think that that's what it was for, so that you wouldn't just have a 30-hour game. So, once again, it all makes sense. I feel like it's a heads up at the end of the day. With that being said, let's move on to the final thoughts. So is Crisis Core worth playing today? Absolutely! Now, I know that this game may be a little bit repetitive, but goddamn is this story worth it. I love the story. I absolutely love Zack. I love pretty much almost everything about this game. Except for Genesis. But even then, I've came around. I feel like this is worth playing. If you're already into Final Fantasy and you haven't played this one, you should give this one a try. It puts a lot of context in a lot of things, and it just expands the world in the right way. With that being said, I think the game's worth it. So with that being said, what's next on the Final Fantasy train? Well, it's an interesting one, because we're going to be talking about books. I'm not going to be doing it alone, and nor am I going to introduce it this way, because it's going to be the first time we talk about books. We're going to go see if the children are alright, and we'll see if this will put me on the road to a smile. I'm trying really hard here. I'm reviewing the books next, which are The Kids Are Alright, A Turk Story, and On the Road to a Smile. We're going to try those out next to see what happens.